the best thing about fundraisers is their ability to ask for money, but one of their worst is the lack of understanding of a local businessman. And he said, I highly recommend that you go for 5 years in a business that you run.
How did you get into a John Deere dealership? Because if you're doing the fundraising work, I mean, just own your own dealership, that doesn't seem like a simple thing to start up, and you need cash for that. And
the family was just in a place where I really needed to be there for the family, and that's why selling it was good. It was 6 days a week, sometimes 12, 14-hour days, and it was good to move on. And to Trinity Western is where I believe God called me, and I was there for 21 years. What do you do with what I gave you? And your answer is, I left it all with my kids. I think that's a fail. Yeah, you're still going to be in heaven, but I don't think that's going to please God.
One man fail through poverty. I have known 50 men fail through riches. Would you agree with that? Is wealth dangerous?
Wealth for sure is dangerous. I don't see the 50-to-1 ratio, maybe. Truly on the throne of your heart when you deal with money. And I think he's not always. And I think
it's interesting how that answer basically comes back to that. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Furious the Curious Show. I am here this morning with Paul Weme. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
So we got in touch through our friend Bill, and we got connected, went for lunch, and got to hear your story. And so you have worked for, I think, over 35 years in the fundraising
So
space?
40 years total, but about 7 years of that was running a John Deere dealership.
That's right, which I think is really cool. So it was mainly for Trinity Western, right? How long were you?
21 years as the Vice President of Development at Trinity Western University.
That's what they called it? Development?
They called it development. They called it a number of things, but
okay.
it's
But basically that it's
fundraising.
You're the point man for
Fundraising arm at Trinity Western, yeah.
Okay, yeah. What I thought especially was interesting was that in the job that you're in, asking for money, it's kind of an awkward job to a certain degree. So I thought it was really cool that you were on the flip side of it, in that you ran a John Deere dealership and owned one for a bunch of years.
Yeah.
But I just want to back up, maybe just get the Cliff Notes version of your life. How did you, out of high school and into your 20s, what work did you start with, and how did you end up getting to the dealership?
So I started going to Bible school right out of high school, and I went to Peace River Bible Institute in northern Alberta. And during that time, I felt God calling me to missions. And the first job that I had was with Child Evangelism Fellowship. I was going to be the director for British Columbia. And they had said, you have to raise some money. And I said, I don't really like to raise money. My dad made it very clear that he didn't feel that any of his children should be money-grubbing fundraisers. And so that was my start. I didn't have my father's blessing out of the gate. But he became a champion of my ministry down the road. And Child Evangelism Fellowship, my first ask was $5,000. And in 1986, 85, that was a big gift. And so from then on, I learned how to ask people. I said, well, if you can give this much money, if someone else gives this much money, we can raise $80,000. That was our budget at that time. And we were able to bring that money in. And so God has blessed it. And I've actually learned to understand God's will in my life to be able to talk to people about money. Not everyone likes to talk about money. In fact, most people want to keep it fairly private.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it at all. Yeah. You started with raising money yourself. How long were you in missions before you?
So Child Evangelism Fellowship, I was raising money for the ministry here in British Columbia. Part of that was my salary. At that time, it was $500 a month, big whopping salary back then.
Yeah.
It was actually tight. It was
What
hard.
year was that?
That was 1985.
Wow.
So still
you could live
not a lot
off
of
that in 1985, 500.
And I was able to buy a house. That was those were the days when you bought a house for $62,000.
Wow.
In Langley.
Wow. Yeah. That is wild.
That tells you how old I am.
Well, also that how crazy inflation and how everything has been disproportionalized since then.
I was definitely underpaid, and it gave me a passion throughout my ministry life to make sure people are paid properly in ministry. And I think that's a really important note. Sometimes we figure the pastor should work for half of what we make, and I think sometimes we underpay, and now I think more so churches are paying on par or getting closer at least.
Yeah. What would on par be?
In regards to the Lower Mainland, I think close to what public school teachers are made based on the degree, if they have a master's, if they have a whatever. It's kind of the par that I would say would be healthy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why do you think it is that people think that people ministers should get paid less? Because there is this. I mean, I feel it myself. Even just thinking about it now, that it's like it's a sacrifice. So it's like, you shouldn't. It's not for profit. So
for sure, I think the story there is God's called you to do this, so you should do it for less. And I've never felt that way. And so I think at my time at Trinity Western University, we were able to bring faculty and staff to a closer on par with their colleagues in the secular. And I think that's just important because we need to take care of our families and our children and our children's children, as we'll talk about later.
Yeah. Okay. So you did that for a while, and then how did you go into working?
No, I actually went to work at Northwest Baptist College and Seminary. And that was on the campus of Trinity Western. It had just moved out of Vancouver. And one of my first jobs was to raise the money for the Northwest building on the campus that's just recently been renamed. But it was $4.5 million that needed to be raised, and that was the big challenge in front of us. And that was big dollars for back then. And about 1992, I went for a training session with a guy that said the best thing about fundraisers is their ability to ask for money, but one of their worst is the lack of understanding of a local businessman. And he said, I highly recommend that you go for 5 years in a business that you run, that you have 5 or more employees, 500,000 or more in revenue, and you learn what real business is all about. So you can actually talk to the businessman, and you've been there. You're able to understand the businessman. So it was when I came back from that one-on-one in Seattle with this wonderful fundraising consultant, the president of the college at that time, his name was Doug Harris. He said, so what did you learn? And I said, he told me to quit. He thought that was not a good investment at that time. But I think God showed him later that that was valuable. As I came back out of that time at the John Deere days in September of 2000 to work at Trinity Western University as their fundraiser.
So I want to back up a bit. A fundraising consultant. So there's people that are out there just as a business teaching other people just how to fundraise better.
Yeah, so there are a number of really good resources for the fundraising world where people say, I would like to fundraise. I want to learn how to fundraise better. Tell me some tips. People that have learned it. The fellow that I had talked to, his name was Norm Edwards. He was the first person in the Christian world to raise $100 million in 1 year. And he was working with Wheaton at that time. Really godly, wonderful man. And he cared about the individual. He cared about your family. He cared about you. And he was a great consultant and had some good advice. And the number one piece of advice was when you're talking to a businessman and he tells you he's having a really hard year, don't ask for the same amount of money that he gave the year before in a prime year for himself. Yeah,
that sounds pretty.
Which unfortunately, many times fundraisers don't pick that up.
They don't
because they just don't. They're not listening. They're just ready for the ask. I'm going to tell you, I need 100,000. I know you gave 80,000 last year, but I need 100,000 this year.
Yeah. Okay. How did you get into a John Deere dealership? Because if you're doing the fundraising work, I mean, just own your own dealership, that doesn't seem like a simple thing to start up, and you need cash for that. And
yeah, so I actually I love tractors. We grew up on a little hobby farm up in Smithers, BC, northern BC, and when I looked at businesses around, there was really nothing I could afford. And this dealership, he was asking $487,000. And he had come up with a number based on not buying the building, but having the business itself. It was called Norpac at that time. So I went to my dad and I said, Dad, we should buy this. Hint, hint. And Dad was in Seattle at that time. And he said, yeah, I think that's a good idea. But halfway into the deal, he said, I'm not really wanting to do that. We live in Seattle. I'm retired. And so I went out on my own. My oldest brother actually helped put up the first $50,000 to put down as a down payment for this, was able to get some financing. And so in September of 93 is when I bought the John Deere dealership in Langley. And God truly blessed it. I learned an awful lot. It grew just about tenfold over those years. And I was able to be sued by people, have audits. I learned an awful lot during that time. It wasn't all rosy. And I worked really hard, but it taught me an awful lot. And we have 4 kids, and my oldest son actually started washing tractors in the business. But when I resigned or sold the business in 2000, the family was just in a place where I really needed to be there for the family. And that's why selling it was good. It was 6 days a week, sometimes 12, 14-hour days.
Yeah.
And it was good to move on. And to Trinity Western is where I believe God called me. And I was there for 21 years.
What surprised you the most about running your own business after doing in the fundraising space?
I think the biggest thing was the opportunity that I had to share my faith. And being in the Christian ministry world, you're around a bunch of Christians mainly. And I would have landscapers and different businessmen come and sit in my office and say, hey, you're one of those Christian people. My dad just died. Here's what I'm working through. Give me some of your thoughts on how to deal with this. And God gave me the opportunity to share my faith exponentially. And I was really blessed to be in that world. What did surprise me as well is there was an incredible opportunity to make money. And we were able to go over $5 million in sales. I really thought selling lawnmowers, you would have to sell an awful lot of lawnmowers even to bring in $1 million worth of revenue. And through sales and service and parts, I was able to really find out what are the opportunities out there. Langley is the horse capital of British Columbia. And so we were able to go up and down selling mid-sized tractors to the hobby farmers. And we were able to sell many. I love selling. I'd load one up on a truck and head out to some horse farm down 216th or wherever and drop off the tractor and say, try it out. Got a new hydraulic reverser. Anyone can drive this tractor. Love talking that way. So enjoyed it.
Okay, but the guy that recommended it to you said to you, one of the things that fundraisers are good at, they're good at raising money, but they're not good at understanding small businesses or businesses in general and stuff like that. And that's something, a weakness. So what was it? What did you gain, I guess, in those years of owning the dealership that helped you later on in fundraising? Like what were some of the things you were missing beforehand?
Well, I think the best thing for me to learn all the time because of my personality is to be able to listen and to listen to what's going on in their world dollar-wise. Are they having a good year or are they having a bad year? How can you pray for them in that time? How can you come alongside them and just be their friend? And I think the whole key of fundraising is the 3 R's, which is relationship, relationship, relationship. I think that's missing a lot in our world where the one-on-one across the table talking over a coffee or just coming to their dealership or their place of business and just hearing them out. How are things going? And being able to pray for them and come alongside them in a real way, not I'll send you a text, I'll email you. And that seems to be what's happening in our fundraising world a lot.
Was it easier for you to connect with business owners after you were back in the fundraising space because you had owned a dealership? Because I know, for example, like a pastor that's actually done real world stuff before they become a pastor, or if it's a coach that has only just ever coached and not actually, in whatever they're in, not experienced the stuff themselves, it adds a level of trust and authenticity. Or
for sure, I think the fact that they know you were in business. And initially when I came back to Trinity Western, my top 5 donors all had John Deere. And I'm not sure it's a plug for John Deere, but many times the wealthier people were able to afford the John Deere tractors. And they had trust in me because I fixed their tractors. I took care of them for warranty. I dealt with them personally. And because of that experience, I learned that that's what I needed to do for people. If they had given money and lost the receipt, or if they really wanted to give towards a certain project, I wouldn't try to talk them out of it because I had a greater need at the university. I would say, let's talk about what that is and how would you be most blessed and honoring God by giving to that specific cause. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you get people to come to you when you were on the dealership to try to donate money to different causes and stuff like that? And so you were on the other side of it?
I was totally on the flip side. In fact, I had a couple of really hard years, and then I had some really good years. And in the good years, we were able to give tens of thousands of dollars, if not over $100,000 to the kingdom. And the people that were coming to me that came and got a larger gift, the next year they came back and it was my worst year. I was under 3 audits. I had GST, PST, and a general audit, and all of them were just hammering me. And I was actually having the worst year of my career. And I actually told one of them, "Are you not listening to me? I just told you I don't have a dime. Don't come back this year." And unfortunately, I have no money for you. Yet he still kept coming, and he kept asking for the dollar. And I was because I was in the fundraising world, I was very clear with this individual, and he still didn't learn. And so, yeah, it was interesting being on the flip side. Right now in my career, one of the things I'm trying to do is do philanthropic coaching and share with people why they give, where they give, and what's God put on their heart. What's the passion he's given them? Yeah. And I think I'm also training people to say no to charities that aren't on their heart. And God hasn't put them in front of their wife or in front of them as a couple. They're not on board, and say, don't even meet with them. Don't give the time, because you're wasting their time and yours. Yeah. And that's been being on both sides of this. I've been able to do some of that. So I've really enjoyed that. That's my favorite. Yeah. That's where I believe God's called me.
Yeah. So in that, going from a spot where you're getting asked for money to a spot where you're flipped around again and you're asking for money again, it's a position of giving is a position of power to a certain degree versus asking, which is, was that hard to go back to the fundraising space after running your own business for a while, or what was that transition like for you?
Well, if you really believe in something, it makes it a lot easier. Yes. And where I was asked to come to Trinity Western was to help start up the School of Business. And I had seen God working through me in business, and to get more people in that space was very motivational for me. The president that hired me at that time was Neil Snyder, and he had a real passion. He said, there is no space that is secular. A lot of people say, oh, I'm in ministry. Well, I honestly, and Neil had said at that time, we're all in ministry. And even if we are, as a businessman, accountant, a lawyer, a teacher, we're all part of God's kingdom. So I loved that, and I was passionate about it. So actually quite easy. It was hard going from having a significant wealth base and then going to, I think at that time it was $52,000. I started at Trinity Western. So I took a significant cut, and both my wife Shirley and I really had to tighten our belts. Yeah. And but God was able to work through those 21 years at Trinity Western, and it was a great experience.
Okay, interesting. Have you met other guys that have done the same thing as you, that ran a business and said, "Hey, I'm gonna quit all this and I'm gonna go work in ministry full time"?
Yeah, I would say some of the best fundraisers that I do know today, and they talk about in the fundraising world, 80% of the people aren't even paying for themselves in the fundraising world. Oh, wow. It's very hard to get a good fundraiser. And the people that are doing it, many of them had been in business at some level and had experienced some of the angst and the blessing, both sides, and were able to be a lot more transparent in dealings with people. And hey, I've been there. I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, that is really big. Yeah. Okay. After 35 years around wealth, what surprised you most about how money actually affects people spiritually? Because you're around a lot of wealthy people that are able to give a lot to the university and in other organizations. How do you think wealth affects them?
Well, I think God has used money to do some incredible things. And when people see that it's God's money, the wealth affects them very different. If it's my money and I did this, you see a very different picture coming out of individuals. And I've seen both. And I think through my career, I've seen people that have just been multi-millionaires over and over, if not billionaires, and God has used them in really significant ways. So I've seen both. And I really like to focus on, if someone truly understands that God owns it all, that changes them as individuals, and they see themselves as part of God's kingdom rather than their own.
What percentage of people that donated do you think viewed it that way?
So if people ever listen to this podcast, they go, "He's talking about me." Yeah. No, I'm not. Yeah. I would say it's unfortunately more leaning towards people that are man-made their wealth. But my time at Trinity Western, I found some incredible people that God had gifted them with funds, and they passed them on in a really neat way. So I would say the number is split. Yeah.
And how many people you've worked with gave out of guilt because that's what wealthy people should do, or good Christians should do, versus actually love for souls, or for the organization where the money is going?
I think there is a time when we won't have receipts anymore in our nation. I think that's not too far away. And I think once that happens, there are people that give out of guilt, but there are also people that give for the tax receipt. And I think there's going to be a day where that's going to all be set aside and people will give because God's asked them to give.
Yeah.
And but for now, I would say there's too many people that give out of guilt, or there's too many people that give just because their buddy says, "Hey, come to this golf tournament. I need you to give money to it." We don't ask the question, so what is the ministry and is it effective? And I think God has entrusted us with funds that need to be given to God's kingdom in such a way that they're effective. Many times we invest our money and we build a business very wisely. We put a lot of thought into it. We work it through, but when it comes to giving, it's helter-skelter and all over the place. And I think God can bless and bring greater joy to our giving if we really think about it a bit more, understand the passions He's given us, and give directly to where He's asked us to give. And are true to God and what He says.
Is it as a fundraiser? Was it ever awkward or in a weird position when you were talking to someone and when you realized, hey, this person doesn't actually care that much about the university or whatever it is? They know they're supposed to give, and they have a lot to give, and so I know they're going to give me a big check. But were you ever in a position like that where you were talking to someone and would you then try to push them to? I know that's kind of what you do now, is helping people understand where they're actually giving to, but how would you deal with a situation like that?
So in those days, we were always under a fair bit of pressure to raise money, either for operations or for a new building or whatever. And many times, I'll tell you two stories. One was a man, he was an older man. He gave, his name is on one of the buildings at the university, and he is no longer with us. But he basically one time came to me and he gave me a check. He says, "Here, take this check." He said it with that kind of tone in his voice. And I said to him, God loves a cheerful giver. And he had his window partially down. And I tossed the check back through the window and I got in my car and drove away. And I thought, boy, that was maybe stupid, maybe a bad career move. But it was the best thing I ever did, because I had numbers of talks with this individual about why he gave, and God loves a cheerful giver, and we need to be cheerful givers. And if we can't, let's not give. So that's number one. I think many times.
How did he respond to that? Because that's a pretty bold move.
Oh yeah. So he actually he was mad and phoned back the next day and said, "Do I have to smile to give a gift?" He had a German accent, and I remember it very clearly. I said, "Yes, you do." And he gave me a fake grin, and I said, "Not good enough." And he was actually a John Deere customer as well, so I knew him quite well. And we had very good chats after that time. And I think God used that in our lives to say, hey, let's be cheerful givers. I think it's more important. Many times people would give not out of cheerfulness. And I think God blesses you when God loves a cheerful giver. So I think He blesses that, yeah.
And where does the lack of cheerfulness come from? Is that they're in a person's relationship with God themselves, do you think? Or is it just because of everyone's asking them for money and they're not really know where to go to? Or
I think a bit of both. I honestly think the relationship with God is key. And I think if we understand who God is, and that God is to be revered, and God is to, He owns it all, and we need to give funds back to His causes. I think that's part of it. I think the other part is we're begrudgingly giving away this money that we might not see again. In fact, most times we don't. And I don't think people see the flip side of when we stand before Him in heaven one day, and He said, "What did you do with what I gave you?" And we go, "Well, I invested a lot. I was in the stock market. I did well.
My boat."
Yeah, check out my boat. So bottom line for me is I think God loves a cheerful giver, and that's the bottom line. And number one, more than that, He owns it all.
Yeah. I know some Christians say focus a lot on God's sovereignty. That says God will provide. So why fundraise? Why do you need someone to go out there and represent and try to haggle people for money? Maybe that isn't the right word, haggle people. But what do you say to that?
I a lot of times there are a number of ministries in the world that say you're never allowed to ask for money. and WEC is one, Worldwide Evangelistic Crusade, and they say that God will know and will gift you, and many missionaries are fairly successful with that. But I honestly believe we need to talk a lot about more with our money, more with our friends. Why do we do what we do? And God's put something on your heart. But I think even more so with our family. I think one of the biggest mistakes that have taken place over the years is as we give our money, we keep that a secret. There was a verse quoted, don't let the right hand know what the left hand's doing.
Yeah.
And many times we're in a position where we don't clearly tell our children and share with them the passion we have and the missionaries that we support. And God is working, and we give away some of our money. We might not be able to buy that quad for you on the farm or whatever because we gave that money to a missionary. And I think they need to know a little bit about the sacrificial giving. I think we need to be much more sacrificial in our giving. We talk about the 10% and the offering above that, but I honestly believe we need to give much more.
Okay, and so what do you think of that verse then? That you shouldn't your left hand know what your right hand is giving. Like, where does that apply? Where does it not apply?
So I've talked to a number of theologians on this, and I think the most important thing to understand from it is God owns it all, number one. Number two, we don't need to brag about it. And I think sometimes when you talk about the Pharisees and the widow's mite and all those things, we don't want to flaunt our giving. And I talked to some people. It's interesting because at Trinity Western, we put the names of donors on buildings. And a lot of people really were, hey, I would never tell anyone what I give. And obviously that tells you what they've given. And yet at the same time, I would challenge these families that, by putting your name on the building, you're stating to your kids and your children's children the importance of giving and that you believe in this cause, and it's a good thing. So it's split. I would say sometimes it's the right time and sometimes it's the wrong time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, and I just want to circle back to it, that wealth and money is one of the things that people talk about the least. There's like an awkwardness around it. Why do you think that is?
I think it's trust. I think many times people don't trust talking. That's one of your most intimate things. Number one. I think number two, sometimes people want to portray that they actually give more than they do. And and then sometimes people don't want anyone to know what they're giving. I honestly believe it's important to share with your children, maybe not how much you give, but who you give to and why you give to them. And you need to know that yourself. I think that's the biggest issue in the giving world. I really am talking to a number of donors now that they call it donor fatigue. They're tired. They're frustrated. They have so many people asking for money. And it's only going to get more. I think in our today's economic climate, we're sitting with the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. So that middle class giving is missing. And I think because of that, you're going to see much more appeals than you've ever seen before. I was Giving Tuesday was just recently, and at 9:00 in the morning, I had 87 Giving Tuesday asks on my email. And I'm not a big donor, so I just imagine what they're facing. So I would say, bottom line, we have to really know why we give, where we give, and then follow God's heart and the passions He's given us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it primarily an act of obedience giving? Is it an act of faith? Is it an act of worship? Like how do you?
Yes, to all three. I totally believe it's an act of worship. I believe it's faith. Sometimes we need to give more than we think we should be giving. And then it's an obedience. God has called us to be faithful and generous and be givers. Yeah.
Have you seen, you've dealt with a lot of donors, but donors that you could, from the outside, you didn't know that they would even have wealth and they just continue to live a simple life. And I know one of John Piper's things is like set your wage when you're young about what you can live with. And if it's 100K or 200K, and after that, if you ever make more, just give that away. There's different ways people view it, but have you run into those individuals?
Absolutely. I admire a person that doesn't have the very fancy houses and lives in the same house they've been in for a very long time, and is very faithful to giving and sees giving as the reason God's put them on this earth. And I love when they're kind. And I got to be really careful. I'm not telling people don't own a boat and don't own all these things, but have it in perspective and make sure that God is happy with what you're doing. God owns it all, and whatever we do with what God has entrusted us with, we just need to be faithful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I just wanted to interrupt here and talk briefly about my coaching. One of the things I've observed over the last couple of years in the guys that I work with, and just a demographic of guys from 25 to 45 and even older, is that they're missing 4 big pillars of security in this life. And so the first is they don't trust the government. There used to be some sort of trust in the government, but that's gone. And so there's no more security there. They don't have much hope for the future. They think the world's going to crap, so not much hope for that. They believe 80 or 90% of what they grew up with in church is bullshit. They don't trust the church. And then fourthly, they had absentee dads. So maybe their dads were physically around, but not emotionally. And so you have no more moorings in this life. All those things are things that give you security. And so you feel very isolated. And so you're 30, 35, 40 years old. And you feel like you should have your crap together, but you don't. And so you feel shame. And then you isolate and actually withhold yourself from other people. And you're also having a really hard time figuring out what you believe because your dad never believed in you. These other things that tell you what you to believe in, the church or the government, you can't really trust either. But you don't really trust yourself because you've never been believed in, and so feel very lost. And so you don't really know what to believe in, and then it's really hard to know how to behave and how to show up. And so you feel very lost and isolated. And those are the kind of guys I work with. That was very much my own story as well. And what coaching really does is it doesn't change you in 10 weeks, but it gives you extreme awareness so you can change. So you do know what's going on and understand where the feelings of emptiness come from, where the feelings of lack of security come from, where and how that affects you in your work, how that affects you in your home. And once you deal with those things, there's just massive implications for it in a positive way, where you live with so much more peace and intention and know where you're going and why you're doing it. And if any of that resonates with you and you feel like that's kind of where you're at, I would love the chance to be able to work with you. I'm very good at the coaching I do. You can see that on my website, testimonials of the guys I've worked with, how effective it is, and your life will be much better for it as well. And so if that's you, please do reach out to me. You can hit me on my socials, or you can reach out to me through my email as well, kyle@furiouslycurious.co. On my website, you can just book a discovery call and see what it's all about. And yeah, we can go from there. So anyways, with that, let's head back to the show. What do a lot of wealthy Christians worry about at night that rarely admit publicly? You get a kind of window into a lot of these people's lives.
Absolutely. I think I have heard from a number of them in regards to, I hope I've been faithful. I gave $1 million to this cause, and then I found out the money didn't really go where it was going. I think a lot of their worry is, and the trust in the organizations that are out there, the large amounts that are spent on administration, they just want to know the money went to where it went. That's why I always tell donors, give to tangible things. If you're giving to a scholarship for a nurse, make sure that nurse gets that. The whole area of administrative funds, or I give to administration, God has put that on a few people's heart, but not many. And I think it's really important that we make sure that we follow what God's put on our heart. So back to your question, I think they worry about their children. They worry about their grandchildren. They worry about, is my money going to ruin my kids? Stats are stacked against them. 70% of second gen, 90% of third gen. And by fourth gen, most of their money is gone, if the stats are true, which I believe they are. And I've seen this over and over, and that's why I wrote the book Wealth Drift, because I just saw so much money being passed on, and people saying, I give my kid so much a month, and he seems to not want to work. What's going on? I've seen all kinds of cases that are challenging, and parents that want their kids to have it better. One of my favorite quotes that I've heard many times is, I work extra hard, so I got lots of money to help my kids not have to work like I did. And I go, I don't think that's always the best. In fact, that's usually the worst. And when I've seen Wealth Drift is 2 stories of a family that's done it well and a family that hasn't done it well. And what is the right thing that you should do in passing on money? And I've seen both sides of it. And I really believe that we need to focus when we're making money. Are we being faithful to what God's called us to? A number of people have said, Paul, you wrote that book and it says, don't give any money to your kids. That's not the case at all. The book is written to say, give wisely to your children, know what they can handle. And I think helping them get to through education, helping your grandkids with Christian education, I'm a solid fan of. And I also believe that if we help them buy a business versus just giving them cash is so much more important. I think when we stand before God one day and he says, what'd you do with what I gave you? And your answer is, I left it all with my kids. I think that's a fail. You're still going to be in heaven, but I don't think that's going to please God.
Yeah.
And so I honestly believe we need to leave something for our kids, but not crazy numbers. And it used to be, it was $20,000 to each of our kids because our house sold for $100,000. Those days aren't there anymore. And many times, even the average person, including you and I, are going to look at some wealth and we're going to go, hey, we got to be careful what we leave with our kids.
Yeah. Well, I'm a pastor's kid, so I won't get much.
There you go.
Coming down to passing down the wealth, do you think people should give their wealth away before they die as much as they can? Because then they can actually experience the joy as well of giving to the different organizations where it's going to versus...
So give while you're living so you know where it's going, I think is a great quote. I honestly believe, here's a challenge that Shirley and I years back heard, I think it was on Focus on the Family. They said, use some of your money now to make memories, because that's the only thing your kids will have. Money is fleeting, but memories stay. And so we, in a number of years back, we took our whole family to Australia. And we had just a wonderful time of just all of us together. And it was important. And I think our kids saw that they were valued. And I think that's one way that you can do it. Giving your money to charities. I believe giving the most money you can. One of my good friends, his name is Ted, and he said, he's actually the forward in my book, but he basically said, I want to bounce my check to the undertaker. And so he has done a very good job of giving away a lot of his wealth, and he had a fair bit of it. And he really wanted to make sure that it was going to what God had put on his heart. And every time we've had many debates about why he's given to what charity. And my favorite thing is to do due diligence dives onto charities. And that's what I do for donors right now in my business. And I try to say, so are they faithful to what God's called them? If it's a well in Africa, is there going to be a well in Africa? And if it's a well in Africa, is it going to be promoting the book of Quran or the Bible? Because many of them are quoting the Quran in ministries that you'd be surprised at.
Interesting. What patterns do you see in families where wealth becomes a blessing instead of a curse?
In regards to the blessing, when people get their families engaged in giving, and they are passionate about giving away money, and a number of family foundations that I've seen have done that recently. I think also, I love when people give a little bit of money to their kids. Say if their annual giving is $100,000 and they have 4 kids, they get $10,000 each of their kids and say, give it wisely. And here's the parameters that God has called us to as a family. I love that because I see blessing in that.
Interesting. And what about a curse when it's hurt them?
I know of quite a number of families where they've given money early and the kids quit their jobs and are flying around the world on millions of dollars and then all of a sudden run out and they curse mom and dad, or mom in some cases. It's just a sad situation. And I see the curse is when people say, hey, quit spending all my money. They think it's their money. And I think that's the trend that I'm seeing that's the scariest. We're all going, well, when I get my money from my parents, I'm going to do some really fun stuff. I don't think parents that have kids in that situation should give them much money because I don't think it's wise.
Yeah. What about first generation versus second generation? Someone that has made all the money themselves in their own business. Now their kids have the money. Is the second generation less generous than the first? Do you notice that?
So here's the thing I'm noticing that's worrying me a little bit. I'm a strong believer in evangelism and discipleship. I think those are the 2 most important things we can do on this earth. Ministries that aren't doing that or becoming more what I call social gospel seems to be where the second gen kids are going. So say if, for example, Power to Change or Focus on the Family or Young Life or something like that would be more I would see in the discipleship evangelism area. The kids aren't supporting that. They're more doing other ministries that are less and more in the social gospel.
Just soup kitchens.
Yeah, like food, giving food to people and stuff. And I'm not saying that's bad. I think there's a value for that, but I think you need both. And especially if you're doing a food bank, for example. I love Langley Food Bank because they're all about Jesus And
Well, you can integrate them, right?
you can, but many times it's not. And I think many times ministries try to straddle the fence on this. They try to be secular and Christian. And I say that's a bad place to be.
So that would be more of the second generation is just less Christian then, no? Because if you love Jesus, love the gospel, know that you want to help people not for 50 years, but for 500 million years, because there's an eternity coming, that you would then be giving accordingly.
I think so. I think they have a different focus. If we're here on this earth and our primary purpose is to glorify God and live for Him, I think they're missing that point. Although the Bible is very clear about feeding the orphans and the widows, and I think we need to do a better job in that world. But I think we need to do it with purpose and focus on Christ and focus on leading people to Christ.
Yeah. The giving for people's daily needs is often what Christ did first as well.
100%.
But then He followed it up with the gospel and
solid. Yeah.
Okay. What is the most common lie wealthy Christians believe about giving?
There's two. I think the prosperity gospel is one that's scary, and I didn't deal a lot with this in my career. But many times people think if I give money, I'll get more money back, and that should never be a motivator. I think the other thing is when people do it for putting their name on something and getting themselves accolades, I think those are two big lies that are ineffective in the Christian world where I come from.
And have you seen that?
100%. Yeah, totally. And it's interesting now I'm working a little bit in the secular world with the Langley Foundation, and there's a total different motivation. And so yet I see just wonderful people that just love Langley and want to give back to Langley. It's been fun. But that's, I see when I look, and what my passion right now is helping people understand what passions they have and how they give back to that is just so, it's been a real refreshing time in my life.
Charles Spurgeon has a quote that says, where I have known one man fail through poverty, I have known 50 men fail through riches. Would you agree with that? Is wealth dangerous?
Wealth for sure is dangerous. I don't see the 50-to-1 ratio maybe, but definitely wealth can really damage people, and I've seen it firsthand. The whole purpose of writing Wealth Drift, my friend Ted Hilton has said many times, Paul, you got to get that book out there. People need to know about this. And how can we handle wealth well? And what does the Bible say about children and children's children? And what is our responsibility to them? But the failure many times comes from not putting our time into understanding that transition of wealth, but just making more. And I see people make, and never talk about transition. And then they're 85 and they're thinking their 65-year-old son's going to take over the business. He's going, hey, Dad, I'm retiring. I'm 65. I'm out of here. And I see bad family transition happen. I would say more than not, actually.
Yeah. And what about more in general, just fail? And like, I know money gives more opportunity to sin and just more temptation. Everyone's after you. Everyone's your friend.
Yeah.
And that adds a lot of temptation, stress. Like, what, can you speak to that?
I definitely think that money can draw us into sin, 100%. I've seen it. I think all of us to some level have experienced it. But I honestly believe more money doesn't make more happiness. Absolutely.
What's one hard truth you've had to tell a donor that actually helped them spiritually, besides throwing the check back at them?
Throwing the check back through the window. I think always is hard as a fundraiser to tell someone that the passions that God has given you don't align with what I'm doing and what I'm promoting here at Trinity Western University. That was probably the hardest for me. And to tell them, and they went, no, I do want to give to the university. I said, but we haven't landed where you want to give. And until you do that, you should probably be faithful to what God's told you to. And that took years of maturity as a fundraiser to get to that point. But what that gave me was incredible trust with that donor the next time we talked.
Yes.
And I think being real with them and being honest about what God's put on their heart is the most important thing we can do.
You've interacted with a lot of different wealthy people. Do you have an example of someone, and you probably can't share names, of who was monetarily very wealthy, but also very joyful? Because I find a lot of times wealthy people are not joyful people. They're actually grumpy and stressed and withdrawn. Do does anybody come to mind when I ask that question? And what were some of the characteristics of that person? Do you think that got them to that point?
100%. I knew a number of people. A couple of them are with the Lord today, but definitely had a passion for the kingdom. And what really brought that around was, even though they had lots of money, they would give hundreds of thousands of dollars to numbers of charities every year, they had joy. They really had joy because they saw purpose. I think the number one problem with our wealthy people is they don't have purpose. They think their purpose is to make a bunch of money and make a lot of people happy. And I don't think once they understand that it's the joy comes in truly giving back to God's kingdom for God's causes, for his purpose, that's when they find joy.
Yeah. What does a healthy detachment from money actually look like in real life? Like how do you get detached from it?
Well, I think once we see what God wants for us is our best, I think that's focusing on that and not focusing on more money is the best thing you can do. There's some incredible examples currently. Hobby Lobby, the founder of that, is a man that gives away tons of money, and he travels the world telling people to be more generous. He travels with a friend of mine, Bill High, who does an incredible job of sharing with people that if you truly give to what God's called you to, you're going to have way more joy. The family has started up the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. They've done some really neat stuff. They've given hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, to the kingdom of God. And it's really neat to see.
Yeah. Randy Alcorn has a book, Money, Possessions, and Eternity, which I know you quote a bunch of times in your book as well, Wealth Drift. Just before I get to my question on that book specifically, some of the things he says in there, what do you think of that book? Do you like what Randy Alcorn says?
Love it. I think it's probably, I would say, the number one book to read if you were really into this topic. I was so excited when it came out. I bought that book many times over and gave it away to donors. And number of times the donor would say, "And you think I'll read this book?" That was so thick. And then there's Treasure Principle, which is a breakdown of some of that. I would say it's one of the best books out there.
Yeah.
It's a mini version of that.
Yeah. Okay. So he repeatedly teaches that prosperity can be one of the most spiritually dangerous things God allows, and that it leads to self-reliance, pride, or forgetfulness of God. And would you agree? Have you seen that?
100%. Yeah. I would say as we make more money, we forget about the things that we had to trust God for, and we start trusting in ourselves because of the money. I think sometimes that's the way it spins us.
Okay. A couple of years ago, I went to a Desiring God Donors Retreat in Phoenix, and I was really surprised that I got invited to go there because I hadn't given that much money. But John Piper wanted to get not just the big donors in a room, but also the small donors. He said it didn't really matter if they were big or small; they're both giving, and so that was what he wanted to do. But I know you've dealt with a lot of big donors, but what would you say to the many small donors? Do you have any lessons for them with all the years you've had in the field?
100%. I think whether big or small, I think it's important that we focus on what passions God's put on our heart and where we should give. I love Desiring God because their whole passion is to be able to give free resources to people. And I love his heart for the big and small donors. Sometimes in the fundraising world, and my wife Shirley has reminded me many times of this, we got to focus on all donors, not just on the big donors, and going out on their boat or flying in their helicopter and their planes, although I really enjoy that. But God has had to remind me many times that whether it's the widow's mite or the wealthy man, I need to pay attention.
Yeah. How should Christians think about the influence that comes from large donations? Because if you have an organization and one guy gives $1 million, it's easy for them to, start getting a lot of influence in that organization as well. Do you think that that is right? Do you think the pastors and elders in the church should know how much people are giving, or do you think that should stay anonymous so just one guy knows so they're not influenced? And because it's tempting to talk to that person a little bit more.
So as an elder in my church, that's really a touchy question. Could be that the elders shouldn't know. I think it's important that someone knows. In our church, it would be the person that is the receipt, takes care of the receipting. But I think many times we have to be careful that we don't pay attention too much to that, the major giving. But at the same time, I think when we talk about the big donors, I always challenge big donors to make sure that they can help guide a cause. I'll give you an example. There was a book called mission drift, wealth drift kind of came out of mission drift. And I believe it's a big part of the big donors' jobs to say, if you don't stay faithful to what God's called you to, I will quit giving. I know a lot of donors say, I've given $100,000 to that cause for 20 years and I'm going to still give it. And I said, so are they doing what they said they would? And they would kind of look at me like, what does that have to do? I says, everything. You have a big responsibility with your larger dollars to help charities stay on mission and what God's called them to do. So yes, there is a place for it, but there also is a bad place for it when you give into them. Say, for example, if someone gave a large gift to go off mission and become more secular, then you're off mission, and that's not good. And that happens lots in a lot of charities where a guy says, I'll give you $10 million, but this has to happen. And you always have to stay true on that. At Trinity Western University, we actually had a policy in regards to what we would take money from and not.
Okay.
And so that I think is important.
What would you not take money from?
I say probably Molson's was one that was on the list back in the day when Trinity Western had a non-drinking policy while you were on campus, but that's not the case anymore. But I would say things that are maybe lottery or things like that I think would possibly take you off when it maybe is not pleasing to God, where the money has come from. Yeah. Slavery, for example, would be something I'd be against.
Okay, thanks for making that clear. Yeah. Have you seen generosity turn into idolatry or like ego with a tax receipt?
100%. Yeah. It's so many times, I shouldn't say many times, but there's been a number of times where I've seen it's been all about showcasing our giving. And I think that's where it turns into idolatry. For sure.
So you're in a position to talk to these people and be a spiritual mentor sometimes as well. Like, how do you approach that?
I would say when I was telling someone recently, they were talking about what did you learn in fundraising? And I shared the 3 R's about relationship, but I also said, in a way, as a Christian fundraiser, you're just about a counselor in a way. They're going through hard times. They come to you. You're their friend. It's interesting now that I've been out of the fundraising world for a few years. I've had people saying, hey, I miss you. Can we get together? For me, that's been the biggest blessing. One of my largest donors in the history at the university, before he passed, maybe maybe a month before, he died quickly of a heart attack, but he shared with me that I was a blessing to him as a fundraiser. And I think that's the highest compliment you could take as a fundraiser, to say you truly bless someone versus it being an irritant or causing donor fatigue. Those are the issues. Yeah.
Would you ever find yourself praying with the different donors and stuff like that and having?
Most times. Okay. Yeah. And even if it was a prayer over a meal, I would bring in praying for their family and things like that. I think wealthy people are always worried about their kids and their grandkids and staying true to God, because wealth doesn't. Traveling Europe for a couple of years, many of them have done, and it's not where God always wants us to be.
Yeah. Why does fundraising make so many Christians uncomfortable? I even had it myself yesterday in church. They were saying that we're very short when it comes to the budget and are asking money at the start of church, and I get uptight. I don't even know why.
Well, I think there's a tug of war going on in all of our hearts, that this is my money, that's God's money. And I think that's what's happening there. That's one part of it. I think the other part of it is, hey, what are you talking about? My money. Like, this is a personal thing. Stay out of my face, basically.
Okay. So I don't think it's that for me. I like giving to the church, but more that it's you're taking rather than giving, or you're in an organization is like a church or a different charity is an organization in a giving sense. They're not there to take, and now you're taking, and it's like becomes like business like or transactional. Like how do you get away from that transactional feeling and more? How do you communicate well to the church or to the people that are potentially giving to do this as a free thing if you care about this versus making it feel like an obligation? Or
for sure, I think two things come to mind right away. Is number one, that you're passionate about what they're doing, and that's a cause I really want to be a part of. Sometimes we fall out of that with our local church, and we didn't like the way they handled something, or they got so much money they don't need any more money, or in your case, they're falling behind because they're not good with their budget, and I don't trust them. And I think sometimes we that's part of it. I think the other part that strikes sometimes to me is I actually would like to buy that new motorcycle. Sorry, that's one of my weaknesses. And I really believe that God has needs to be truly on the throne of your heart when you deal with money. And I think he's not always. And I think
it's interesting how that answer basically comes back to that every time. And it's about probably not even money. It's probably all things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think once we understand who God is and truly embrace him and what he's called us to do on this earth, we're going to be a lot happier. And money, holding on to money, I'm in a situation where my wife is much more generous than I. We're always in this little bit of a tug of war. If we say, hey, that missionary, we should give them some money, her number usually comes through double, basically, of mine.
Yeah.
And I am very blessed that way. And I think that's been a North Star for me as I try to embrace this myself.
Yeah. What I'm sure you've dealt with other fundraisers as well and seen different ways that people fundraise. What are some of the manipulative ways that fundraising is done versus a faithful invitation?
I would say the thing that comes to my mind is the use of guilt. I think and many times where, we're taking this, everyone's seen the child with the fly in the eye on the front page of something and saying, you need to give to this versus what has God called you to do? And I think the most important thing I would say to a fundraiser is understand your donor well, understand his passions. And when you link those with your charity, you're in a much better spot than guilt them into fundraising.
When wealthy Christians near the end of their life, what do they regret financially? What are they, if you talk to them, do they share those regrets? And what would some of the regrets be?
Well, for sure, many of them, I've talked to very wealthy people that their children have totally turned their back on them because they haven't just given them their money. And their regret is they haven't handled money better with the transition of money. And I would say that would be one of the things that I've seen quite often. They're lonely people. The other thing, wealthy people don't have a lot of friends. They don't know who to trust. And that's why relationships so important with a key fundraiser that can work with them. That's why when I see the amount of AI used with customer relationship management, CRM software, going at people right now, it really bothers me because it's no relationship.
Yeah,
and that it's not, the trust isn't being built. And these donors are lonely and they want to see people face to face. When someone would say, I'm looking at raising $1 million and hey, could we do a Zoom? That's just about the worst thing. It shakes my body every time I hear that, because if you're not in front of someone for $1 million, you got a lot of things going wrong.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't do that in a business
absolutely.
deal. So yeah, interesting. So is that what you do partly now? And I don't know exactly how you word your business now, what you do, but do you help? I know you help people that want to give. Help them give to the right organizations, the things that they're passionate about, and to differentiate those things and do due diligence on the different organizations, but also help them in transitioning their wealth and helping them talk through those things.
So I'm not a financial planner at all, and I got to be very clear on that. But I do believe God has given me a gift of understanding people's passions and helping align them with the charities that they should be giving to. In the back of my Wealth Drift book, I have a chart that says, here's your passions, here's where you're giving, and maybe there's alignment needs to take place. I think the other thing is having clarity of where you give and why you give is so important. And so Weme Consulting, talk and come alongside people to help them figure that out. And I think that's the best thing I can do for people. Philanthropic coaching, I guess you could call it. So I really believe a lot of times when people give, they don't know why they give. I told someone the other day, when you stand before God, here's 2 of the questions you might be asked. What did you do with what I gave you? That's very biblical. It's in the Bible. And I gave it to my kids. I said that was the wrong answer. I gave some to my kids, totally good. But the other one is, I don't know where I gave, but I hope it was good. Well, you don't do that in your own financial planning. You don't do that in your business. Why are you doing that with God's money? So understanding clearly where you give. So I believe my biggest help that I could come alongside a donor is to help them understand where they give and to help them with the due diligence. I've been able to talk to many presidents of Christian organizations in Canada and been able to say, hey, what's going on in that ministry? And if you say that's a well in Africa that's being built, tell me a little bit about it. Tell me the story. Is there a church connected to it? I believe that's one of the biggest wastes in our world is the water projects around the world, because most of them never come to fruition. Hear me right. I think people need to have water, but that's the issue.
Yeah.
By having people that are taking high administrative costs and hiring someone that doesn't even build the well themselves to build the well, there's 4 transitions that the $1,000 becomes next to nothing by the time it hits the well. And the well's not built properly, doesn't stay working. So that would be my challenge there.
One of the things I've been more convicted on is that our giving should be more the amount of time or hands it should go through should be shortened. So what I mean by that is that the giver should be able to give it to the receiver directly and see the impact of their money rather than just putting it in a box or online in some organization, not really understanding it where it's going or the impact it's having, which is essentially I think what you're saying as well. But how do you do that just for the average person? Because we can give to our church, and I sometimes even feel like in giving to the church, I don't really understand where the money is going. Should we be giving to people more directly in sense of just giving to a family directly versus like to directly to a family? They're not going to give you a tax receipt,
right?
But like, do you think giving should go more that way, and that it's too much towards just like organizations, and we're not doing enough towards like individual things as we see the needs and being like, hey, I know that person needs a car, I'm going to buy him a car or whatever it is.
I actually think that's the truest form of giving, when you give money without a receipt, and I believe that's where we're headed. I would say there are some incredible organizations doing a very good job, but many of them have grown a little bit heavier and fat in their way, and the administrative costs are very high. So I always ask people, so what is your administrative cost? And there are some organizations that have turned that into an incredible, I would call it a lie. They quote a very low number, but everyone, you can see their T3010, every one of us could go online and look up an organization's 3010. So some of the things that I look into is who actually gets the money. And if you're building the well, is it you that builds the well, or the guy that builds the well, that builds the well, that builds the well, and it 4 layers down? I see a ton of money passing around through charities where one charity takes 25%, gives it to another charity that takes 25%. By the time the dollar hits, it's very low. So yes, I would say give it as directly as you can. Specifically, give it to maybe infrastructure. A recent gift that I was involved in for the Langley Foundation, we gave directly to Gateway of Hope, the Salvation Army Center in Langley, directly to their kitchen. So it didn't go into the big pot or the red kettle, as you'd call it, but it went directly to a tangible infrastructure. So I always talk to people about, if you're giving money to that cause and they say that they're going to bring 10 women off the streets, what country? And did it get there? And those are the kind of questions I would like to ask. And I think sometimes we've come up with some beautiful reports that say some glowing things, but aren't tangible. So when God's put something on your heart, truly seek His will of where you should land those dollars.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing everything today. If people want to find your books, where can they buy them? So we have Wealth Drift here, Wealth Transfer God's Way. I think Restoring the Joy of Giving is a book that you're coming out with soon.
Yeah, hopefully by the end of the year.
And you have a secular version of Wealth Drift, which is Wealth Journey, which I think is kind of funny, with the promise of perils of intergenerational wealth. Where can people find these books, and how can they contact you?
Amazon is the best place to get them. And what I found is if you print one book or 100 books, it's the same price.
Yeah.
And so it's a less expensive way to have books. I love to give them away, so that I think I've not made a lot of money, but I've spent a lot of money on giving away books.
Okay.
But I truly believe the message needs to get out. So I have a website called wealthdrift.ca.
Yep.
But I think reach out to me directly. On the back of the book, it tells how you can get a hold of me. I love to talk to people about how can they be faithful to what God's called them to do with the wealth He's entrusted them with.
Awesome. Well, guys, if you share this episode to your social media and tag me, I will send you a free copy of Paul's books here. And maybe you can even sign a few and
Sure.
give a little note in there for them. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, comment, like, subscribe. And again, they can find you. Do you have a website?
Yeah, wealthdrift.ca.
Well, Drift this. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kyle.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed that episode and were blessed by it, would you be willing to support the show? That would help a lot in creating more content, improving the quality of the content, putting the production value, getting more guests on, and me being able to spend more time and energy towards it. So if you're interested in doing that, you can click up here and it'll take you to a support page. But you can also subscribe to the podcast by clicking over here and doing that. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.